Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Waterlife Debrief Podcast. I believe we're on episode 8 now. We're trekking along, and we're so excited to be here for yet another episode, and we hope that you are too. We were just talking earlier that we've been getting such great feedback in the lobby here at church, just about everyone really enjoying the content and following along with it and things like that. So we want to say thank you for your support, but also throughout the week, whenever you're listening to these episodes, if there's anything that really resonates with you, or you just love it or hate it, support your church and share it on your feed, on your social media feed, and just encourage your friends to listen to it as well. That's a way that we can just spread the message even further. We always talk about the Bible on here. We always talk about Christ on here. So that is an easy way just to get the gospel message out to people. So if you like this, share it on your social media, share it with others. Also, something new that we started this past week. If you have any questions about anything that we discuss on the podcast today, if you have anything specific that you heard about in the message today that we don't cover and you have a specific question about, you can email those questions to podcast@waterlifechurch.com. Again, that's podcast@waterlifechurch.com. And we are checking that regularly. So if you've got any questions, feel free to submit those to us and we will try to cover those in here each week as we go through our episodes.
Indeed.
So yeah, with all of that being said, today we had a wonderful day at Waterlife Church. I'm so excited to dive deeper into the message that you gave today. It was a great message. But just even at the beginning of the message, before you even got into the word, we were able to celebrate 8 baptisms between both services. So that
Get fired up.
Yes, that was a huge blessing to be a part of, to celebrate that with those folks. But also something that you talked about before or after both of those baptisms, you covered our 8K for 8C generosity offering. So why don't you, in a way that because there may be some people who are listening who haven't been at our church long and they may not know what that is. So why don't you cover that?
Yeah, so every year we've done this since the beginning. In 2012, we started at church 2 months in. We did this. It's how we support our partner ministries, the ministries that we work with during the year. We got a variety of them. Most of them are here in Caldwell County. And our philosophy is, we don't create a ministry when there's one in the community that does it well already. Right. So we've already got a great pregnancy center, for instance. So we come alongside them, we send them money and send them volunteers and partner with them. So that's how we like to do it. So this is our way we fund them and we give financial. So we take up this 1 day of offering, 1 day a week, 1 day a year offering, and then we take 100% of it and we give it away. Yes. So that's what we do with it, and we divide it among our ministry partners, and it does good all year long. So it's like a lot of great, organizations, as I said, a lot of ministries right here at home that really help people in Caldwell County. So it's a really big deal for us. The people at Waterlife consistently over the years have just shown increasing generosity in this year by year. So we're excited. Last year was the biggest year ever, and we're certainly hoping for that and praying for that again this year. And as we said, we think everybody can and everybody should. It's what we do here. God's generosity toward us ought to generate generosity within us. So that's what we do. So we're excited about the children being a part of this, our students, and adults of all ages. So it's going to be a big deal. So the 21st is when we take that up.
Yep, and it's going to be huge. I mean, whenever we just did Serve Caldwell with our partner ministries, several of them that we talked to, because we went and asked them beforehand about their needs and stuff, and they were just telling us, we're getting toward the end of the year, and everything is depleted, and we're having a hard time with this. A lot of them already kind of have plans with what they need those funds for, and so we are happy to be able to help supply whatever we can, but it takes our church showing up, like you said, everybody can and everybody should, and it's a blessing to be a part of.
Yeah, and people always ask me all the time is, they see the number, they're like, well, it must be some deep. Well, the neat thing is we have just broad-based involvement across our giving. We've got people, of all different financial levels, and we just got broad-based support of this thing. So it's one of the things I just love I love being a part of it, love to see our church do it, and I get to hear, and as you do, Natalie, being in the church, we get to hear the good that comes from it all the time from the directors of these ministries we support. So it's a good thing, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen on the 21st.
It's going to be huge. Yep. Well, looking ahead to the 21st, but we'll go ahead and just talk about today. So again, awesome message today. Thank you so much for just delivering that to us. And we started out in the story of kind of Nehemiah's story today. So we went over to that. So you could obviously tell by the way that you were delivering the message, you love this book of the Bible. You love this story. You were so fired up about it. So what I want to know is, what is it specifically that stands out to you that you just love so much about this book? I know that you love all books of the Bible because it's God's word, but you can just tell this one fires you up just a little bit extra.
Yeah, well, it is a neat book for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's for anybody out there that is in leadership, aspires to be in leadership. There's a young person out there that wants to be a leader someday. That outside of looking at Jesus, who's the greatest leader that ever lived, this is the book. And it's just such a neat story of somebody that really had no training, somebody that had no leadership position to begin with takes on this monumental task and leads well. So I like it on one level that there's these great leadership principles, but I also like it for it really is a how-to to build great things in your life and to accomplish things. And so, I like it too because it's really interesting. And you know this, Natalie, we have a leadership course here that we've developed out of this book that uses Jocko Willink and Leif Babin's book, Extreme Ownership with Nehemiah, because all the principles that Jocko Willink teaches in leadership called the laws of combat are in that book. So you know them. I won't put you on the spot, but the laws of combat begin with, first of all, with cover and move, which means teamwork. And on a team, leadership-wise, we have to have teamwork. We have to work together. Yes, you've got a hierarchy sometimes in how things are tiered, but there's got to be teamwork or nothing happens. Second thing, simple. And we talk about this one all the time.
Yes.
Communication has to be simple, clear, and concise. Like the people on the team need to know, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What's the mission? What's the vision? All that kind of stuff. Prioritize and execute is my favorite one. And we'll talk about that today in a couple places where you figure out what is the thing I need to do now. I'm not trying to do 5 different things. I start here and then I move on to the next thing. That's prioritize and execute. And then you've got decentralized command, which is simply people understanding the mission so well and having the latitude to be able to lead themselves. And so in this book, you see every bit of that.
Yeah.
And I've been to several of the leadership things, that Jocko and Leif do. They do these things called battlefield reviews, which I love. And I've shared with them, and even J.P. Donnell, who works with them, who spoke at our church, I'm like, it's all in Nehemiah. I've told them every time. And I sent them an outline of this that we made into our leadership course that just shows, there is cover and move. There's teamwork all throughout this thing.
Yes.
You see that with the people and how they work together. You see simple. I love when he sits in front of the people and Nehemiah goes out and gets a plan. God's put it on his heart to build the wall. He's done his due diligence. He's got permission from the king. And then after that, he goes out and does a recon to get a view of the project before he ever sits down and talks to any of the people that were living in the community about rebuilding the wall. Then when he sat him down, this is what he says. I love how simple and clear it is. He says, you see the trouble that we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. So come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and we will no longer be in disgrace. I love that. And so they all said, yeah, let us start rebuilding the wall. They understood exactly what they were up against, why it was important, and let's go do it. I just love that.
Yeah.
And then you see him prioritizing and executing at every point. Like the first thing he knows he does, he prays. God puts it on his heart. He asks for help from God when he goes to the king. So he knows that's the next step. He's got to get the permission to be off his job to go lead this thing. He's got to get the credit card, I always call it, of the king to get the supplies and all this kind of stuff, the safe passage and all that. And he gets every bit of that. Then he does a recon to get a plan. Then he talks and gets a team, and then they start doing things. He just does things incrementally like that. And then there's just that decentralized command. The Bible tells us when they start building the wall that each family was given a certain section of the wall, and they're all working together. So they're making decisions about it, working together for a common goal. So I love it from that standpoint that it's just really good leadership material about how you lead using those principles there. But it's also such a great how-to for life. And that's one of those things that, here at our church, that we have seen throughout the history of Waterlife Church. And I referred to that a little bit this morning about, it was intimidating to start Waterlife Church. I had certainly no experience in that. No one did. Yeah. We were given this opportunity. God called us to do it. And it was kind of like, okay, will it work? Will it not? I don't know. God just called us to do it. Let's go. And I always joke with, I remember Becky to this day telling me, we have a mortgage.
Yeah.
Our boys were fairly young at the time, and I'm like, I know, I'm willing to work more than one job, but this is what God's calling us to do, and she agreed, and we were supportive, and we started off the corporate offices were in my kitchen for the first half a year, I think, before we got a little office at the Morrison building here in town. But I remember, starting out those days, and, I was talking this morning about you have to have the right attitude to build something, and you have to have, that right willingness that you're going to be willing to work. And I'm just telling you, this is why I love it so much, because they're rebuilding a wall, but in my experience, so much of what Nehemiah did and we experienced here at our church. We were talking about having that right attitude. We knew we couldn't build this thing if it wasn't for God. God's got to be in it. You can't build it without him.
Right.
But we knew God expected us to do what he called us to do.
Right.
And that is to work hard. And I think about effort and sacrifice. There's never been a point along the way in this church's history, and you know it, you've been on our staff for several years. It's never been easy. It's never been easy. Like, there's been a lot of effort from a lot of people, a lot of sacrifice that went into that. It took time.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a building now. We've got some of these things. I mean, it's amazing that we're doing this podcast. I mean, that's something I wouldn't have thought was on our radar at all years ago. I mean, I never saw that. Never even saw having a building. I didn't even know that was going to be the case. Always wanted one.
Yeah.
Thought it'd be a great tool, but didn't know that. But it's always been a lot of effort. It took a lot of sacrifice, a lot of time. And listen, you know this from your tenure here. There's obstacles all the time. There's a problem all the time. There's something all the time to solve, something to work through. And opposition, we've had all kinds of opposition. Like, the enemy hates what's going on here. It has been, as God has been doing more and more here, there's just been more spiritual opposition. It's just all the time. I'm not even surprised by it anymore. I'm like, oh, there it is.
Yep.
But we've also had opposition from people in the community over the years. And, we get our, critics out there, because our church is a little different than some of the traditional churches here in town.
Right.
But even more than that, I mean, in the early days, I remember we had just gotten started. And I talk openly about this because it happened. And there was an individual in the community that was, rattling the school board to not let us use the building, trying to, say separation of church and state, which clown doesn't even know what he's talking about. And the courts have been clear on that. You can rent school facilities after hours.
Right.
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
But this guy was rattling that, and he was fairly influential in the community. And that whole school board knuckled under on that. Next thing you know, they were pulling the rug out from under us. And that was really frustrating to deal with that opposition, but that was a huge obstacle too. But we figured out a way. God turned it around for our good. We went down, ended up at the Civic Center, which was a blessing from 7 years. But so I say that to say, like, I know what I speak of when I can challenge people that if you're trying to build something, it's never going to be easy. It's always going to take effort. You got to have a willingness to work.
Right.
Yeah, you trust God in it. You ask for God's help, for guidance. You can't do it without Him, but it's going to take time, effort, sacrifice, all that.
Yeah.
There has never been an easy day of this. We are not at a place where we're cruising now. It's not like, it's so much easier. I honestly feel like, and from my standpoint, leadership-wise, it's even more challenging now because this place is more complex. Like in the early days, to me, the leadership was fairly simple because it was that prioritize and execute. We had nothing, and so it was like, we got to have a service. So everything was about just making that service on Sunday happen. And so we had a little kids team, makeshift kids team. We had a makeshift host team, and then the worship team and me. And you're putting that together. It's a church in a box. You're setting it up every week. We had to be organized on that. We had to train everybody, and we would do that. And then it was kind of like, okay, we got that going. Now we need to do something for student ministry. And then it was, like, hey, we need to add staff. And so it was fairly easy in a sense to understand what to do next.
Yeah.
As it's gotten way more complicated, that's gotten harder for me. We've got more staff, more people here, more ministries here. It takes more resources, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So there's never been a quote, we've arrived.
Yes.
And I think the day you get that way with anything, you're on the downward trend. Now, you remember this, me calling the staff together a couple years ago and say, there's too much management going on and not enough building.
Yes.
And I remember the days where everybody was a builder, and we got into management mode, and everybody can get into management mode. Here's what's been built. It's been handed to me, and I just manage it. And if you remember, Natalie, I used the example of all the churches around here that you see that have closed their doors.
Yep.
And I said every one of those churches was a plant. It had some success because they ended up getting a building, and then what happened? Somebody managed it into the ground.
Correct.
They lost that work ethic. They lost that whatever. That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely.
So for me, this story is personal in a sense because it's been helpful to me in my own leadership and things, but I've seen we dealt with the same kind of things that Nehemiah did. He's got, now, to this date, nobody's been trying to kill me like they were trying to kill him there, but we've had plenty of the making fun of him, the character assassination, the obstacles and the opposition, all that. But I love that story for that because he refuses to quit.
Yeah.
We refused to quit when there were days it felt like, is this going to work or not?
Right.
And so for me, it's a personal story, and I just love it. And I love it because when people can see what God did through Nehemiah and these principles, man, that can happen in your marriage, that can happen in your business, that can happen in your finances. I mean, you apply these principles that Nehemiah did, it's a game changer. So I know that's a long rambling today, but that's 100%, something that I just see. And look, you've been leading here, and you do a very good job leading here.
Thank you.
I mean, you've had to apply these principles, have you not?
Absolutely. Yeah, every day.
Even sometimes you get frustrated.
What? I know. Who'd have thunk it? For sure.
Who knew?
Yep.
I mean, so I've watched you have to, and you and I have navigated through some of these things that I've, because I always like to share what I've learned with our staff behalf. And, you know,
you always go back to these principles. It's like, because every single thing, like in leadership, I mean, it truly does go back to those 4, laws of combat that you were just talking about. It's so true.
And just what it takes to get there. You know, I love that it begins with that recognition that something's broken.
Yes.
And he's got that recognition that I had something with breaking it. You know, it was our sin that broke this thing, and God judged us and disciplined us, rightly so.
Yeah.
But we're coming back, and we've got a repentant spirit. Something needs to change. And then you see him trusting God's word and applying it, because they'd gotten away from that. So he's moving people back. He's following God's call. And as he's doing that, he has that right attitude. God, I can't do it without you, but God, I know you expect me to do what you called me to do. So he goes after it, and he works hard. And he's got that willingness to work, where he puts in the effort and the time and the sacrifice and all that. And not one of what was accomplished, none of that was luck.
Yeah.
None of that was the easy button, as we talked today, or the fast thing. Even though it's relatively fast, 52 days, it's still, that was a big project, big thing. And big God principles, big leadership principles there. So I love this story for that reason. And I'm telling you, any person out there, especially the young folks that, who knows, I hope they're listening. I mean, that want to be leaders, that, want to have a business of their own or something like that, lead at a level. Man, Nehemiah is your guy to study. And it's just such a great example. And I really hope people will read it. Like, the book's longer than 6 chapters, but the story of the building project, the main guts of it, are in 6 chapters. I mean, you can read it in 10 minutes.
Right.
But it's such a great thing to read it about. Look at how well he leads.
Yeah.
And how, he just stays focused on the mission. He understands the why. He rallies a team together, and they go do it.
Right.
He deals with obstacles as they come, deals with opposition as they come, and he refused to quit. I'm doing a great work. I can't come down.
Yep.
I love that. It's such a great attitude for life. So
and
I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. And that's what you were talking about this morning. Like, his only point of reference was God's word. Like, he was able to lean on God's word, because if it was up to him, I was thinking as we were talking today, it's like God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, and he will give you everything that you need to accomplish what it is he set you out to do. But it's like, if we're just looking at Nehemiah, it's like his only skill set really that he had was that he was the cupbearer. Like, but again, they come and they tell him about this, and he has a burden. That's what you talked about. He had a burden about it. And so he just set out and he took action, and he made it happen. And so, but he leaned on God's word, and he knew what God had promised.
Well, right. And one thing that you bring up that's a great point is, like, he has no, like, on the surface, as we talked this morning, no previous leadership training. He's not a builder. He's not all this stuff. But God saw what was in him, And so who knows, somebody's out there listening today, God sees what's in you. If he's calling you to build something, he's showing you what to do, put a plan in your life, something, a desire in your heart to do something great for him. He's going to equip and empower you to do it. He will do that. So it's a great book. It's a great story. Like I said, it's just a leadership study, but just so much for life about how even to overcome the ups and downs of life and just hang in there. And that philosophy, I know everybody sometimes gets to points in life where you feel like you want to throw your hands up. Right. And you feel like you're losing at life or whatever else. And it's that attitude of, I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. Like, Natalie, your mom, you're raising Jet, you're a parent. Parenting can be exhausting sometimes. Yes. Sometimes you feel like you take one step forward and 2 back. I know that's how we were sometimes. But you have to remind yourself, I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. I have to remind myself of that sometimes, because, sometimes people can, just some of the stuff of ministry, just life can be, it's just like, look, I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. Like, this is important. I'm not going to quit. Got to keep moving forward. So I don't know. It's great book. I can't recommend it enough to people. And hey, we're going to do the leadership class again that we built out of that, and using Jocko Willink's and Leif Babin's book, Extreme Ownership with the Laws of Combat, and teaching that through the lens of Nehemiah. And so for the leaders out there, or want to be leaders, soon to be leaders, it'd be a great opportunity. So stay tuned. We're going to get that done in the next year or so.
That's good. Sure. Well, honestly, this is so good. I feel like we could just drop the mic at this moment, but we will go ahead and dive into just a couple of the points that you went into today that really just stood out. And so, you were just talking about, we were talking about how Nehemiah, he heard about how vulnerable this city was. And so he felt burdened to go and do something about it. And so a lot of times in life, we try to make people see like this is applicable to you right now in current day. This wasn't just Nehemiah. Sure. This is anybody at any stage of life. And so we all find ourselves at a point in life where something is broken. And so for me, it really helps me to visualize, like you said, how those old walls had been crumbled down and there were big rocks in the way. And so the team was having to work together to move them out of the way and different stuff like that. So think about, anybody listening, think about in your life right now, an area of your life that just feels crumbled, that just feels totally destroyed. Just think about that moment in life. And so for a lot of us, that can look different. That can be things like you hit marriage hard this morning. You know how you have to fight for your marriage and things like that. So marriages, finances, relationships, breaking of trust, different things like that. So what causes things? What causes those walls to crumble? What causes that ultimate downfall? I know today, you know, or you just mentioned that it was because of their sin that had happened in Nehemiah's story. But in some of our situations today, how do we find kind of our walls broken and things like that?
Well, I guess it depends. I mean, yes, for when you look at that story there, Nehemiah takes ownership over that. He recognizes and he repents of the fact that he said, look, God, we can't blame anybody else but ourselves. The reason the city walls are torn down, everything's in ruins, is because we all have sinned against you. We've been unfaithful. We've false these idols, and you've been right to discipline us. This is 100% ours. So yeah, in their case, it was sinful. Like, now, what other reasons can it cause something to be broken? Well, sometimes it's just ignorance. And ignorance doesn't mean stupidity.
Right.
Let's make, like, not we're saying you're stupid. Ignorance means I didn't know that, right? It's kind of lacking. It's what the Bible calls someone who's simple. We just lack experience. So just like you might be a homeowner, and you might not realize, oh, if I don't keep paint on the house, things rot. Okay, maybe we didn't know that. Maybe we didn't know we're supposed to clean out the gutters and make sure things clean, or we get water in the basement or whatever else, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So sometimes you can have something broken, maybe because you just didn't know. Maybe we didn't know the biblical principles for how marriage should run. A lot of people never have any teaching on marriage. They never have any premarital counseling.
They don't have healthy examples of marriage.
They don't have healthy examples, correct.
Yep.
And so that's one reason in our marriage policy here, we require everybody, if you're going to get married here, you got to go through the class that Don, our counselor, and his wife Renee do, the 14-week thing.
Yep.
And we're trying to set you up for success. So sometimes people come in and maybe they just don't know. Same thing with parenting. I don't remember anybody handing me a handbook, that kind of thing.
I missed mine too, don't worry.
Yes. Bible helps us with
exactly,
that. But
yes.
that goes back to the same thing. You've got good and bad examples perhaps, but maybe we just don't know. We just didn't know. So we were naive, we were simple. We didn't know. So maybe things could be broken for that reason. Other times, it certainly can be, as we said earlier, absolute rebellion and sin, and we just ignored God's ways and did our own thing and made a mess of things. That's probably most common. But then it could be just maybe neglect. Just like that house, you neglect your house over time. It's not like you're out there rampantly, going crazy. You're not worshiping the devil, but you just, maybe you just weren't investing in the marriage. I remember Becky and I realized, when you got to that season where we were raising kids and in ministry and all this, we just were spending all this just family time together, but we weren't spending one-on-one time together on date nights and things like that. And it just got to the point where we're kind of like, just feel like roommates, So that, and there was a little bit of neglect there. We just weren't paying attention. We were focusing more on the kids, and we realized this is not a good pattern. We need to get back to that. Right. So who knows? Maybe that's a way that sometimes we can find things down. So sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes it might be neglect that we just kind of maybe let things go.
Right.
We just weren't paying attention, It's just like a car. You're not paying attention to your car. You veer off the road. You end up in the ditch. So maybe that's part of it. I think I've heard a saying one time, I think Joby talks about this all the time, Joby Martin, but like for every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditches.
That's true.
And so think about it with neglect. It's just easy to, get things broken because we just neglect and we just drift off the road, so to speak, end up in the ditch. And then sometimes it's just flat out sin. We're just living, rebellious life. We're just not applying God's principles. It's not that we don't know them. We're just, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then we end up learning a hard lesson. So those are some of the reasons I think things get broken.
Yeah, that's true for sure.
And this is why, let's go back to our theme. This is why it's so important. We joke about not having a handbook, but we really do. And it's this. It's the Bible right here. Yes. And so this is why it's so important for people to read their Bibles again, why it's so important for people to get in a Bible study and learn these things. Kevin's, our discipleship pastor, is getting ready to start all the new, we got quite a few discipleship classes and groups coming up in the fall. Like, these things are designed on these topics. We've got ones on marriage. We've got ones on parenting, studies for women, things to help disciple. And so this book has got so much truth that we can count on, that we can apply, that helps us not be naive and simple and ignorant about things. That, that's what a husband's supposed to do?
Yes.
Oh, that's what a wife's supposed to do? That's how we're supposed to raise our kids. That's the goal. That's the focus.
Yeah.
See, all that kind of stuff is really important.
Yeah.
Same thing with money. The Bible talks tons about money.
Right.
We got a financial class we do here. I mean, it talks about budgeting, talks about how to get out of debt, how to stay out of debt, how to live within your means. I mean, how to be generous and develop that. I mean, all that stuff is in there. So it really is so important for people to take the initiative to read the Bible on their own, but also to take advantage of all these opportunities we got out here that the church provides that can help disciple people and help you learn in these things, so we don't get things broken down, or so we can repair them, because we got to know what the word is to trust and apply it.
Yep, absolutely.
There you go.
Totally agree. So we're talking about just different ways, like how we can find ourselves, these things in our life being broken. So what about people who are kind of in the shambles right now? They're in a marriage that feels broken. Their finances are all out of whack. I know you were just talking about, obviously we're giving people tools here at the church, but, and really you just have to kind of take that first step. But just what are some ways, like, for if you know of people that are in these situations and they just don't even know where to start? I don't know about other people, but for me, it's hard for me to think about, okay, so say that somebody's struggling with finances and they want to become debt free, but it's like they're in such a mess and they just don't even know where to start. And for me, we had kind of talked about this earlier. I've never really been like a goal setter. I've never really even known how to think that far ahead. I'm just kind of like taking it day by day and just dealing with what's in front of me. So what are some practical steps that you can give people that just feel like they're hopeless and like they're in the ruins right now? How to repair things that are broken?
And so you ask a minute. Let's start with, where do you start?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go back. We're talking lots about Jocko today and Nehemiah, but let's go back to prioritize and execute. So, one of the great misnomers, jokes that's played on the American culture is this idea of multitasking. I can do 50 things at once and well, and my experience, it doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work well like that. Prioritize and execute. What is the priority? What do I do today? And Jesus teaches this in the Sermon on the Mount when he talks about worry. Prioritize, take a step, then move on to the next step. Now, remember, we just talked about this. Nehemiah does this in spades. The first thing he does, he gets a calling from God, and then what does he do? Priority number one, I got to pray to God. God, what would you have me do? So he starts praying about that. Then he knows he's got to go to the king. That's the next priority. So he prays about that, and he goes before the king, and he secures the resources, all that. So he knows there's no reason to go talk to a team if I don't have the permission to go do it.
Right.
I don't need to go talk to the team if I don't have a plan. So he gets a plan, gets a team. Anyway, he does things like that. So my deal would be, all right, you mentioned finances. Somebody's finances are upside down. Okay, well, all right, what do I need to do in the meantime? Okay, well, let's use some logic and common sense. Okay, well, what we've been doing is broken and it's not working.
Right.
Okay. I would always advise people getting some instruction. So, the financial class will be coming up again. I would get in the financial class, or I'd reach out to somebody. We have financial coaches that work with people here. I'm going to take a step. Maybe the step, if it was a marriage problem, maybe the step is I need to contact a counselor.
Right.
Maybe I need to, or even before that, I need to talk to my spouse about, hey, I recognize this isn't working like it should be, and I want it to be better. Let's work on this together. Maybe that's step number one. And then you reach out and you find the resources there and you make a contact. And then you go to the first meeting. You don't worry about the first meeting when you hadn't had the conversation with your spouse, right? But most people just don't take a step at all. So you got to take some kind of step. And sometimes it is a little vague. I don't know where to begin. Well, here's something that we teach here to our staff that Jocko teaches as well. It's called iterative decision making. And what he says in that, he said, when you don't fully know what to do, take a small step in the direction you think you need to go. And then if that proves to be the right decision, okay, then take another step and another step, or of course correct. So sometimes, maybe it's a little vague, maybe you do that, but the one thing you don't do is not take a step.
Yes.
Because that's what most people get. They just get kind of this paralysis thing where it's just
yes.
like, I know this is broken, but I don't know where to begin, so I won't do anything. Well, at least do something.
Yes.
And I'm a big believer in wise people. Like, mentors have been a huge help in my life as a pastor when I was younger, but even now I'm older. I got people in my life. I ask questions, all kinds of people. If I get an opportunity to be around a high-profile leader, I ask questions.
Yes.
Like our buddy Chad Robichaux introduced me to the CEO of Smith & Wesson Firearms and their CFO, their Chief Financial Officer as well, when we were up in D.C. last year. And I thought, what a great opportunity. Here's a guy leading one of the, these huge long-standing American companies leading at a way bigger level than I lead at. This guy's learned something because I don't believe in lucky.
Yes,
absolutely. And so I sat down, had my little note. I said, hey, tell me a couple things about leadership you've learned. And so, I think, it's helpful in those times when you're like, okay, I realize something is broken in my life. Who can I talk to? They're always, God puts wise people in our path that can kind of help us discern what step to take. So if somebody were to contact me about that with the finance thing, I'm going to say, hey, we've got a class, but it's not coming up for a month. But we've got some people that could start meeting with you and looking at it now. That's what I would do. And so sometimes wise people like that can help give you a little bit of a discernment. But again, you're taking a step. You're not just sitting there saying, well, I don't know what to do, so I won't do anything. At least take a step in the direction you think you need to go. Find a wise person. I mean, there's a lot of avenues to help out there, but a lot of times it's sad. Most people will understand something's broken. They'll even feel like the conviction, like it needs to be built back, but we don't do anything.
So. Yeah. And so we're going to put a pin in that comment right there. But then another thing I want to go back to this morning, you were talking about how a house has to be built brick by brick. It doesn't just pop up overnight. And so I think that was a huge encouragement, because sometimes we can see these messes that we're in and we do feel stuck and like we don't know where to begin, but it takes slow progress. It didn't happen overnight, so it's not going to happen overnight, and
Well, and that's true in everything. I mean, look, we're getting ready to get into the Gospels, which I'm excited about. I mean, I've loved the Old Testament. We're getting ready to turn the page and come, what we call Christmas Sunday on the 21st. We're looking at baby Jesus, and we're on to, we're going to be looking through the Gospels and all that. And, a big part of the Gospels is Jesus, calls these 12 guys. And they give me hope, because they are not exactly the best and brightest, and they're not the real educated ones, and they're not the real high profile. They're kind of blue collar working class folks. They were probably in remedial math as well. And there's a case that you can make about that about Peter, by the way. But anyway, we don't have time to go into that now. But anyway, when you look at where they start, I mean, they're just so rough around the edges, and they just get things like we do all the time, wrong all the time. One of the funny and sad parts in the Bible to me is when Jesus has just told them about the cross, and then James and John are like, yeah, okay, about that. Sorry about that, but can we have the seats of honor? And Jesus has to step up and say, time out. And he has to talk about what greatness really is. Then you got, Peter's got foot and mouth disease all the time. He's getting into trouble. You've got the time when James and John, again, they're going into the town and they're offended and they're insulted. And, hey, Jesus, do you want us to kill them all? And Jesus like, no, we don't want to kill them all. And they move on. And so I love the before the resurrection and after the resurrection, look at these guys. Like, Jesus saw what he saw in them. He picked them for a reason. They weren't an accident. He never gave up on them, but he led them. And by the time you get to the New Testament and you read church history about what happened to most of them, and you read the letters that like Peter wrote, Paul wrote, all these guys, James and everything, man, he took them somewhere. But it wasn't this transformation. It was a brick by brick by brick kind of moment. And so a lot of things in life are going to be that way. Like we were talking about the older couples that are married today and still happily married and love being with one another. Look, they built that brick by brick, year by year. It was week by week, day by day, investing in the right things. They didn't always do it perfectly, but they kept moving in that consistent direction. And that's the thing I think some people lose sight of sometimes, like in life. We fall down or something, we make a mess of something, and we think life is over. It's not over. Get back up, keep moving. You're not going to do it, but keep moving in Jesus' direction in your marriage and your finances, with your goals, your dreams, your priorities, your values. And over time, that consistent direction, God's going to produce something in that, But it does happen slowly but surely. I think we're just so conditioned in America for easy and quick. And that just doesn't exist when it comes to the things that matter. Going back to the church, Waterlife Church was not easy. It was not quick. It's never been like that, right? It's just never going to be that way. Same thing with any of the big areas in life. There's just no such thing. We would love it to be that way. I mean, everybody wants to get in shape and have the, 6-pack abs, 12 packs, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. And everybody wants it like you get a gym membership and I go one time and that's done. It doesn't work that way. Nothing good in life is going to work that way. So that consistent piece, I think, and it goes back to that Nehemiah attitude that says, I'm doing a great work, I can't come down. It's like, I'm not going to stop following Jesus. I'm not going to stop pursuing the best in my marriage and for my kids and for my career or my goals.
I'm not going to voices and all that stuff.
I'm not going to listen to the critics. You and I talk about the critics, and the critics. There's always been critics out there and complainers. I talked about that this morning, and I had told you about that email response. But you can't listen to that. You got to go, okay, man, I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. And if we had listened to the critics years ago, this church would be done. It would have ended a long time ago. Because, man, you talk about in the early days, especially the critics in the early days were just something else. And they're still out there, but it's whatever.
Right.
But, boy, in the early days, there was a lot more of it just kind of initially when we were small. And over time, some of that from the community is lessened. But we knew God called us to do it. And we're like, we're doing a great work. We can't come down. It's a great opportunity. We're not going to stop. We're giving it 100%. And, and little by little, brick by brick, the thing was built and continues to be. And for us, you always hear those stories of the church that starts. They were like, they had 3 people, and 2 weeks later they had 3,000. Well, that was not our story.
Right.
We were more steady plodding. That's how it's been.
Yeah.
But it took that effort, that sacrifice, all that stuff. So this is, like I said, I love, you can tell I love this story.
Yeah,
it's just because there's just so many takeaways. And I think there's so much particularly for young people here. Like, there's so many young people. We got some great young people in our church.
Yes,
we just really do. And got such great promise and stuff. And there's so much potential of them if they can learn this and put this into practice. Because their culture's telling them it should be easy, it should be quick. That's not going to happen.
Yep.
You don't need to play victimhood, blame game. Get out there, build something, and you can do this with God's help. You can't do it without his help, but apply these principles, man, sky's the limit for young people like that. Absolutely. So I get excited about them, getting a hold of that for the church, for their lives and everything else, and understanding, if I'm going to build something with my life, it's going to happen over time, slowly but surely. Yep. That's one of the biggest problems in ministry these days, and you and I have talked about this. Like, they say, I think currently youth pastors, the average tenure across the country is like 18 months. For pastors now, it's only 2 years at a location. Like, you will never build anything in ministry.
Nope.
Or life with that kind of like bouncing around mentality.
For me, that's just like climbing the ladder, just trying to find the best.
But it doesn't work. But you don't. But you may climb the ladder. You may get a bigger church, but you don't build anything. Yeah. Like if you're leaving a church, you're a pastor, and you've been there, 2 years, and you're gone. You don't really know the people.
Absolutely.
It's just that's. I don't understand any of that.
Yep.
But it's the same thing. It's going to take time and effort to build anything of value.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. It's a whole book full of a lot of years and a lot of people like building what he's doing. So I think there's a lot of good takeaways on that. But landing back on your question, you got to start somewhere, but you got to show some initiative and some ownership over that. Like, okay, what do I need to do? Well, pray about it. Nehemiah does that. God, what should I start with? Let's pray, search the scriptures, seek out some wise people, use logic and common sense. That says if I got marriage problems and I think we need the marriage to be better, it's lacking. Well, conversation with our spouse is probably job number 1.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and then out of that, what are we going to do next? Well, hopefully they're open, and we're going to go take whatever the next step is. But anyway, if you don't take any steps, I can guarantee you 100% success of nothing getting built.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And so that's the comment that I told you to put a pin in earlier. And you said that sometimes people get kind of stuck in the ruins and they just have decision paralysis and they're like, I'm just not going to do anything. And then just now when we were talking, you were kind of talking about critics and different things like that. So this is something I've been excited to talk about. So you were talking about this morning in the message kind of about people that have kind of a negative mentality. We chatted about that a little bit. And so today we were also talking about how some people just go through life and they just have an Eeyore mindset where they're where they're just kind of down in the mouth. It's like, woe is me. My life is ruined. It'll never be anything better. And so I think about people who maybe were raised in an environment like that. They had parents that were maybe like that. Like I said, they've never aspired to do more. And so then, like you said, they're just kind of stuck in the ruins and and they don't have any motivation to do anything. They don't really want to do anything, and they just kind of have this overwhelming, like, negative outlook on things. I've met people like this in my life. I unfortunately have people like this in my family and different stuff like that. And so how would you, first of all, I know that whenever someone has this issue, the first step is to realize that it's an issue. And it's like, my life could be so much better if I could turn this around, right? So that would be the first step, is to realize, hey, I'm kind of a negative Nancy. I'm kind of a glass half empty person. Okay. But, because like you said, Nehemiah had to have a positive attitude, a positive outlook to be able to move forward. And you can hit a little bit more on that, like what you were talking about with the negative mentality. But so basically, how do we pull ourselves out of that rut? And if we catch ourselves kind of having a negative mentality, kind of being in that microwave culture where we just want things quickly and we're just negative and down in the mouth all the time, how can we change that? I mean,
well, that's a ginormous question.
I know.
Let's go back and let's talk first of all about people that are chronically that way. So there are some people, you always hear that analogy, glass half empty, glass half full, whatever that stuff is.
Yep.
But there are some people that, to use that expression, that's a Southern expression, down in the mouth, and, that are always just, woe is me, my life is terrible. I remember one of the first people I met like that in ministry was this lady named Glenda. Hopefully she's not listening. And it was years and years ago. And this woman, like, I was kind of swayed by it at first. I was kind of naive, and I was young, and I was like, oh, gosh, this is so terrible. Her work is so bad, and all her supervisors are so terrible. What a terrible boss she works for. And then she'd get another job, and it'd be the same thing. And after a time, I started to wise up thinking,
there's a common denominator.
Maybe a common denominator may be her,
Yeah.
And she just had that spirit all the time. And, when you have people that are like that spirit, I'm not trying to be discouraging to anybody, but,
right.
Sometimes people just don't break out of that spirit. They just choose, and I don't know why anybody would want to choose. Everybody gets down.
Yes.
But I would not want to live that way. But people have got to get to the point where sometimes, almost like an alcoholic, you got to get to the point where, like, I'm tired of living this way. I'm tired of this misery, and I need to make a change. Maybe I'm too negative. That's the thing. There are some people that just, gosh, they're just by nature that way. But I would hope and pray that they would understand God wants something more than negativity, and that negativity will never fix anything. Like, negativity breeds negativity. Like, if I'm negative about my life is negative and my marriage is negative and it's never going to get any better, okay, 100% that's going to be the outcome.
Right.
Yep. I mean, 100%. Like, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out if that's your attitude and your mindset. But what if you were, by nature, maybe you're a little more negative, and you got there and you're like, you know what, I'm convicted. I think God's got more for me. It can be better. Right. It could be better or worse. And, I can sit here and do nothing, and we know what's going to happen. Or maybe I can try to move something and take at least a small step in a positive direction.
Right.
And maybe they do that, and they're willing to do that, and they see, oh, that made a difference. Let me take another step. Let me take another step. But that's a hard one, just because some people would rather wallow in their misery. And I'm not discounting people that got major issues and things. I'm just talking about that person who's down in the mouth all the time.
Yes.
I don't know. I would rather try something.
Yes.
I've always been that way. I mean, like, okay, complaining about stuff doesn't make it better, doesn't make it go away. I'm always kind of like, well, you work with me. When it comes to things that aren't working here at church, it's like, well, let's try something different. Like, we got to try. Like, there's no reason to gripe about it. Like, I don't know why people in the church didn't support fill in the blank or whatever else we believe in. It's not working. But, okay, well, do we need to tweak that? Do we need to change that? I mean, I can get mad at it and get frustrated, but that's not going to fix anything.
Right.
We have to put on our thinking caps and try something different. So, that's the way I'm wired a little more. I can get frustrated. I can, get those same kind of feelings, but I would rather it drive me and motivate me to action, because I know just being negative about it isn't fixing a problem. Right. It's not going to accomplish anything. So for me, it's hard to answer that question, because like, somebody's got to have they have to have a change moment in their life that says, okay, enough of this.
Right.
I can't keep being negative constantly. I can't keep just, wallowing in that. I've got to do something different.
Right. And remind me, from the story this morning, whenever it was brought up, was it at the point, because I know we had kind of talked about how the guys who came and told Nehemiah that this happened, like, obviously they were burdened about it, but he was the one that was called to do something about it. So he could have been like, oh no, that's terrible, and not do anything about it.
Right.
But also along the way, there were obstacles and oppositions. There were so many times along the way that he could have gotten discouraged and gotten caught in that negative mindset. There was such a challenge before him.
Okay. So so on one level, good. Back to your question.
Yes.
On one level, the harder part is for those people that are chronically negative. They got to have a come to Jesus moment. I want to recognize and repent and make a change moment before anything's going to happen. Because like some folks like that, they just choose to be there and nothing's going to get better. Just 100% guarantee you're going to do nothing to be negative. It's going to stay negative, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. But then there's those people that like, you're talking about the negativity, how we get down because, man, I'm busting up against every obstacle and opposition, every obstacle and opposition. Well, hey, we face that as a church. I continue to face that as a pastor in life. You know, there's you just get that junk, okay?
Right.
But what keeps you trying to press forward and move forward? Well, it goes back to the mission. Listen, if the people that are listening today are, there's some married couples out there. God put you together. You said I do before God and these witnesses. That's important.
Right.
That's important. And God wants that marriage to be a blessing.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And every marriage can be better or worse. So I don't want to be negative. I want to let's keep working in a positive direction, right? Understanding the why and understand the mission are important. So for us, obstacles and opposition about the church, this is the most important work in the world.
Yes, it is.
So we can't quit it, right? So, okay, that isn't working. We'll figure out something else. We'll keep doing something, keep moving in a different direction. We're like, hey, let's try this. Maybe we need to, learn about this and investigate this area. To me, understanding the mission is what drives me, for what I do. I was like, I can't quit this because God called me to this, and it's too important. I mean, and every time I see people in that baptism, I'm like, that's what we do and why we do it. And so it reminds me this is important. And see, that's what you see, I think, Nehemiah doing. So Nehemiah knows God calls him to do this. He said, God put it on my heart. Okay, so he knows what he's doing, and his mission's important. He's like, the people are in trouble. They're vulnerable. They're in grace. Look, they're going to be harmed. They're going to be killed if I don't do something. And so, so he's understanding God's called me to do it. People are hanging on the balance. People can be harmed. So I've got this mission. I've involved the people. People are counting on me, and we're going to do that. So, obstacle. You know what? I'm not going to get discouraged. I'm going to fix the problem.
Right.
And you watch him fix out the problem. Like when they're threatening to kill him, that's where they go. All the anti-gun people will love my comments this morning. But, they go get their swords and they come back. Man, they're ready to fight. And he puts half of them on guard and half of, he solves that problem. He solves the problem when we just barely touched on this today. Chapter 5 has this weird situation where, true to human nature, there were some people that were taking advantage of the people that were coming back, and they were giving these loans, and they couldn't pay them back, and it was just all this problem. So Nehemiah's got to wait in that and tell them what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
And you got to correct that right now, and he fixes the problem. He doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't give up. He's like, I got to fix the problem. Why? Because if we don't fix this problem, the mission suffers.
Yes.
We can't build the wall if we don't fix this problem. We can't stay on mission. Later, you got the opposition from the critics and stuff, and he just learns to tune them out, and it's that I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. So you do get in situations where you're trying on your marriage. You're trying to raise your kids right. You're trying to, God put a dream to build that, that business. Maybe you're trying to repair a bad reputation. And, it feels like you're just not getting there. You're trying, God's changed your life, but people won't give you a second chance. And you're trying, but you just keep at it because it's what God called you to do. And I think understanding the why of something is important. That's why calling is important for folks, certainly in ministry, like what we do, but also for anything. If somebody's called to be a banker or called to be, in their work, whatever it is, that calling's important. And so, yes, you can have hard days. Yes, you can be frustrated. Yes, it's easy to, not another setback. I mean, there are days when we've had seasons in our life in ministry. You've even seen some of part of that in your tenure here, where there are days you're just like, man, I want to pull what hair I've got left out of my head, but you don't quit.
Right. It's the most important work.
I mean, you just don't quit. I mean, so if you quit, so what do you gain from that? Well, that's not good.
Yeah.
So I think reminding ourselves of what we're called to as Christians, reminding ourselves of what hangs in the balance. So you as a mom, What if you decide I'm just frustrated, I'm negative, the kid's crazy, I'm trying to do things, and just like, well, I'll just let him be. You can't do that.
Nope.
You can't, and I know
Nope.
you would never do that. That's a
I
crazy,
know,
but you would never do
seriously, it does. It comes through because, and I know, like, whenever we talk about stories like this, it just seems like the time. It just seems like, well, of course, people's literal, like, lives were in danger, but it's like, if you just give up on your marriage, if you give up on parenting, if you give up on your finances, like, you suffer, that causes, like, a domino effect of suffering. Like, so it is important that you stay on top of things.
And I think watch that mission, reminding yourself of that mission, and I'm doing a great work, and I can't come down. And that's one of those things I think we need to remind ourselves. We literally need to say that phrase.
Yes.
I've done that here at church. I'm doing a great work. I can't come down.
Yep.
And it's like, and that's why, I've learned to respond better as I've gotten older to the critics. I was talking to you about the story I shared today. That lady, that was such a, I could have been really snarky on that, because it's just like, some of that stuff, I'm like, how self-righteous are you? You're trying to tell us we're doing church wrong and this, that, and the other, and demeaning everybody in our church because it's not your way. Like, what? First of all, what's wrong with you?
Yep.
But I'm just like, hope you find a church that fits you.
Right.
Because they're great ones. And that's the end of discussion. And, of course, she broke back in, and I'm like, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm done. And I'm not doing that. I don't have time. I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. I don't have time for that. I'll answer once, clarity and brevity.
Right.
But I'm not going to deal with that, right? The mission's too important. That's too sideways energy to get caught up in that stuff. And like, there are hills to die on. And there are other things to like, no. And I think learning, hopefully getting older, we learn a little bit more discernment.
I know, it's hard for me. It's hard for me being on our social media, and I see stuff, and sometimes those emails come through and stuff, and it's just like, man.
Well, everybody's
down
a critic.
In the mouth,
and like I said, Nehemiah's got his critics, because initially Sanballat and Tobiah and all of them are making fun of them and criticizing them early on. It's just kind of criticism, nitpicky stuff. And then it moves on to kind of character assassination, gets a little bit worse, and then they're trying to rally army to stop the work, and then they're trying to assassinate him at the end. But he never, through the whole thing, he never stops. And that's the key moment in that book that I think is the turning point. They're getting close to getting it finished, and a lot of times people quit too early. A lot of times when you're kind of right there and you're really making progress, people don't finish, right? And they're coming after him, and they're trying to, and he's just like, I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. I will not stop. I'm not going to quit. I've had obstacles and oppositions, but the work's too important to continue. So I think there's that for the people that, everybody's going to have a day where it's like, man, I'm losing at life. Well, hey, God loves you. You're not losing that much, right?
Yep.
God loves you. God's with you. God gives you extra daily grace to deal with all that kind of stuff. But don't, what's the option? Giving up? That's not it. Don't give up. Right. Just keep plugging ahead, remembering why you're doing what you're doing. Because look, when we're raising families, you're trying to build a Christian business. You're trying to do those good God things, build things back the way God wants them to build, built on His principles and His truth. That's important, and that's going to bless you. So don't get tired of that, regardless of what the critics say. Don't give up on that, no matter how tired or down you get. Keep moving in that direction, and brick by brick, God's going to bless that. That's the power of Nehemiah.
Yep. Amen. Oh, it's so good. I'm excited to continue in next week and all that good stuff. But speaking of, I guess we'll round out today. You got any other thoughts or anything like that?
I don't think so. We appreciate people listening. And as you said earlier, if you'd share it on your social media, also send us questions. That's going to be kind of fun. We're going to try to get in a rhythm and routine where on Sunday mornings, if people will send us something by 1 o'clock, we'll be able to address it that day. But that's kind of the goal on that. So we'll see where that goes. But we're having fun doing it. And we hope it's helpful for people. And stay tuned. Like I said, we are turning the page on 2026. We're going to be jumping in. We've got the new discipleship classes and life groups coming. Kevin's going to be talking a lot about that. And take a look at that, because some of this stuff, if you're trying to build something good, these classes are going to help you do that.
Yep, absolutely. We're not meant to do life alone, for sure. So, and like Todd was saying, just find those mentors, find people that'll pour into you, because you'll be surprised. I've been surprised at how many people have been through similar things like I'm going through in my life, and different. That's one thing I love about our church. We just have so many different generations, so many different backgrounds. Like our demographic here is just so good. Just get plugged in. We've got plenty of opportunities. So we're super excited. But thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Waterlife Debrief Podcast, and we will see you the next time.